Hi, it's Dr. Tamara Edwards coming to you from Magnolia Wellness and Psychology. And this is the start of your introduction videos. So by now you've already gotten your welcome video, and this one is going to introduce you to ADHD. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, previously known as ADD, attention deficit disorder, but we don't use that anymore since the newest revision of the DSM-5, which we use to diagnose. So most of you have probably heard of ADHD. It's a super common diagnosis, and one that has a lot of information on the web related to who has it, who doesn't have it, what the symptoms include, why they may show up, different things like that. And I'm just here to kind of give you a basic introduction into that, how we conceptualize ADHD as a field, and then how we evaluate for that and what you can expect in your ADHD evaluation. So ADHD, when I say that, you probably have a picture that comes to mind about what that is already. And it's usually this little kid who's super hyperactive, all over the place. You have to tell them 1,000 times to sit down or pay attention. Don't do this. They're never sitting still, or if they are, then they're still moving around in their chair. They probably have trouble remembering stuff. So you've told them 1,000 times to go and do something, and they come back and say, I forgot. Or they go and do the one thing that you've told them to do, even though that one thing is in a list of 5. While that is one picture of ADHD, and it is also a pretty common picture of ADHD, actually, you also have people who fall into the ADHD category who tend to be a lot more subtle in their presentation, where they might be hyperactive, but that might show up as more fidgeting or trouble waiting in lines, or it might show up as being really distracted, being really inattentive. It can also present less behaviorally than what you would typically expect in kind of the first example that I gave you. And so sometimes kids and adults can skate below the radar in being noticed and being identified because they're not outwardly causing problems. That is also one ADHD presentation that's a little bit less commonly known, and one that takes a little bit more subtlety, a little bit more directness in being able to diagnose. So this can also present in adults. Sometimes they have not been, they fall in that second category where they haven't been caught early on. And so they've been able to make things work until they've gotten to a point where it no longer works for them. I have diagnosed people who are well into their 40s and 50s with ADHD who have shown symptoms in childhood, but they managed it so well, whether that's through their own compensatory strategies, or they were very intelligent, or they had parents and family and friends, or like a support system that was really helpful in getting them to navigate this process, or modifying things in a way that would make it easier for them to navigate the process. And to the point where when they got on their own, or their responsibilities or their demands got too big, they weren't able to manage that anymore, and the ADHD symptoms became more present. So ADHD is considered a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it is one that has a big base in biology, in neurobiology, as well as development. So you usually can find it somewhere in childhood. In order for the diagnosis to be made, it has to have been present in childhood before age 12. It's usually characterized by symptoms of inattention, which includes distractibility, obviously trouble paying attention, but that also includes difficulty with organization, problem solving. So the steps to solve a problem, we usually plan those things out in order to be able to do that. People with ADHD usually have trouble kind of laying out the steps to problem solve and then following through with that. I've also seen people who start things and they don't finish them. This can be as simple as a chore and as complex as a hobby. I've tested people who have started washing dishes, and then they noticed that something else wasn't done, and then they switched to that task, and then they noticed something else needed to be done, and then they switched to that task, and they had never finished washing dishes. So that can happen as well in the inattentive symptoms, as well as forgetfulness and daydreaming, zoning out is also part of that. Hyperactivity is another characteristic of ADHD, and I've already mentioned some of those. Being on the go, not being able to sit still, blurting things out in the middle of conversation, interrupting people, often talkativeness. So being really talkative and kind of dominating conversations. Talking a mile a minute, that's one of them as well. Impulsivity is also included within there as well. And this is, not thinking things through relatively well. And so you see that restlessness and kind of some of that jumping in. The blurting out is part of the impulsivity as well. So all of those symptoms is usually something that, like I said, is present in childhood to some degree, and they cause impairment. So what does impairment look like? It looks different for everyone. Some people may be impaired in school while they do fine at home. And there are some people who might be fine at home, but they don't do so well in school or at work. And there might be people who are impaired across all of those environments. But personal success is part of impairment as well. So are these things getting in the way of you being able to meet your goals, being able to live the life that you have? Is it causing depression? Is it causing anxiety? All of those things are things that we consider when we're making this diagnosis. When we're evaluating for this, we are also looking for the information in your history, in your background, to support whether or not these things are present, as well as if they were present in childhood and to what degree they are impacting your life now. So, what are some questions that I usually ask you? Obviously, I'm asking you, do you have trouble paying attention? Do you have trouble sitting still, standing in line, XYZ, XYZ? But there are also some other things to consider when we're looking at this from an evaluation standpoint, because some of these symptoms might not show up in a stereotypical way. So you might have an easier time remembering things if you're studying for school, but you might have trouble with remembering things if you left a room and then you had to walk back in it and it's like, oh gosh, I don't remember what I came in this room for. That's a good example, I think, of a way that those symptoms can kind of translate or transfer. Are you someone who is organized when it comes to work, but when you're at home, your house looks a mess? I can't organize my room. I have trouble getting my laundry done and folding that up in a timely fashion. That's probably like 50% of America in general, neurotypical Americans. But there is also the chance that that is a symptom of ADHD as well. I'll give you a good example as well. One of my adult clients that I tested for ADHD had 2 master's degrees, is in a relatively successful career. And there was someone who showed symptoms in childhood, but they were so good at masking it that it was never a problem. So they didn't have trouble turning in their work or turning in their schoolwork or getting it done. It just always got done at the last minute. So this was someone who, in their master's program, completed like a major thesis paper 24 hours before it was due. And because they did this in such a great fashion that they got an A when they turned it in, they started to continue to do this process and actually had done this process from the time that they were in grade school, high school mostly, up until now. And the main time that that became a problem for them is after they became a parent. So we're forgetting to schedule doctor's appointments, to follow up about certain things related to their child's health, helping their spouse in managing household responsibilities, to the point where it was starting to affect work, and they were in the process of supervisory action related to termination. So you can see how in their history it showed up, but it was in a different way than what would be stereotypically considered ADHD. Those things still count. And those are all the things that we look at. So our evaluations are designed to give you a snapshot of your cognitive ability, as well as your overall functioning, your emotional functioning, your attentional abilities, and different things like that. And then part of what we also have to do when we're diagnosing ADHD is to rule out whether or not the attention issues have overlap or are being caused by emotional issues. Anxiety and depression are some of the primary two that have inattentiveness as a symptom of their disorders. And so we have to make sure that it's not the anxiety or the depression that's causing the attention deficit, or the other way around. Trauma is also another one that is frequently overlapped in terms of symptom presentation with ADHD. So we're looking for all of those things. If you're interested in reading more about our ADHD as a topic, our evaluation process, some of our client profiles in our case studies, check out our website at www.mwpsychology.com. On our services pages, you'll find more information related to those diagnoses, as well as our case studies and client profiles related to that. So I've given you a decent little introduction into ADHD, but if you still have more questions and information about that, then you can check out our website, or you can email us at info@mwpsychology.com, or give us a call at 678-824-7733. So I am going to leave you with encouragement to consider whether or not ADHD is a difficulty for you. If you've already scheduled your ADHD evaluation, then you're already a step ahead of everybody else. But if you schedule for one of our other evaluations and that doesn't include ADHD, but you have concerns about that, then feel free to mention it during your initial appointment, and we can always add that service on. Or we can always consider ways that might show up for you throughout the evaluation, and then make recommendations for you to extend your testing later. So I look forward to getting started with you, and I hope that this was helpful. Thank you, and have a great one.